as we always do, we had a nice little phone conversation earlier today discussing some of the frustrations that follows recruiting rankings, as we always do. So, Brian, I know that you
and speaking of that, I think we can feel better about Jaden Asbury becoming ending up at Notre Dame, because 247 just dropped him 104 spots in their latest ranking updates after everyone agreed that he was the best linebacker at the Future 50. So that's usually a good sign that a guy's going to pick Notre Dame when he gets dropped in the rankings. So we're going to have some fun talking about rankings today. There's no doubt.
A little, yes, it is a little indicator there. Maybe we'll see what happens, but this is, so On3 comes out with the recruiting rankings. We of course had some initial reactions to where some of the Notre Dame players, and just general, honestly, where some players shifted just in general, not necessarily just Notre Dame players. And then 247 comes back and they say, we also have to have a recruiting update because this is what we do. This is the business. And some other interesting rankings to follow. So, Brian, before we start the show, just so everybody can kind of get a peek behind the scenes, a little peek behind the curtain, Brian was pretty juiced up, man. He was ready to go. He was ready to talk about some of these rankings.
It's just so dumb. That's my thing is, like, first of all, how many different updates can you do in an off season where kids actually haven't put pads on?
Right.
Like, this is like the third or fourth different time they've updated their rankings, which to me is just absurd. And some of these guys that are getting their rankings affected by, I still don't know what. It just, the whole process is just kind of like, it's so, the frustrating thing is people put so much into this stuff, and it's become so geared more towards clickbait and who you talk to and who's at this event or that event or who's at this school or that school, that it's become less and less about the respect for getting it right. And then the way that some of these kids get dropped, like, for example, we're going to talk about Drake Bowen. Drake Bowen got dropped about 70 spots in the latest 247 rankings. Based on what? He's been playing baseball off season, right? So, like, what have you seen in this update that you didn't already know about him from the last time you saw him play football, right? Like, what about him all of a sudden makes him, like, in the previous two ranking updates at 247, they had him, Drake Bowen, for example, ranked 75th and then 76, right? So he's been kind of around that area. Now, all of a sudden, randomly, he drops all the way to 143 based on what? He's played zero football. It's not like he went to a 7-on-7 camp and didn't look good. It's not like he went to a rivals camp or an Under Armour camp and didn't look good. He's been literally playing baseball. So did you not think he was fast enough stealing second at a baseball game you saw him at? Did he take a bad angle to a ball in the hole or something like that? Like, did he chase a slider on for a strike three and, in the dirt or something? Like, what could you possibly have seen to jump him from where he was to what you have him now? And so, some of it works out well for Notre Dame guys. Some guys jump up. Joe Otting is now a 4-star, number 224 player in the country. And apparently, according to 247, he's 14 spots higher than Jaden Greathouse. So, just the way that they go about it is just, it's so weird. Ryan Yates is 33. Ryan Yates is 33 spots ahead of Jaden Greathouse in the 247 rankings.
My instant reaction, and I think that we should.
The best was your reaction, Ryan, when I told you the Peyton Bowen rankings. That please share your reaction to that, because he's up to a 5-star and 2-4 on 3, but he drops 10 spots from 247.
Yeah, of course we and Brian put it out in an article this morning, a little bit of a couple of the risers. Now Notre Dame has 3 players that are ranked inside the top 18 players in the 2023 class, which is fantastic. That's the exciting part, right? On 3, you're just like, nobody else has. Only one school has 2. Yeah. Right. And Brian, we talked about this before, the guys that have most likely to make an ascension to 5-star status. And I know we've talked a little bit about that. Peyton Bowen has that type of skill set, right? Mm-hmm. Like, he's a incredibly gifted and talented football player, and he's had a good offseason. I know he was just at the Future 50 and he looked great there, from everything that we have heard from that sense. So I wasn't generally surprised. I maybe a little 18, I was like, wow, he really shot up, right? Like, it was a little bit of a shock, I guess, that he had jumped quite that much, but I wasn't shocked that he jumped up after everything that we've heard and the skill set he has. But then make it make sense to me that the same day On 3's like, wow, you've looked great this offseason. You just look great at this event. We're shooting you up to number 18. Yeah. That in return, 247's like, nah, we don't see it from you, man. We're dropping you to 80 something. Like, what? Right. How can those things align? How can those
Right.
things mesh? Just doesn't make any sense to me
Right.
at all.
And what did Brennan Vernon do to go from being number 212 to not even being ranked anymore? Like,
Crazy.
he hasn't been in a single event. So now you're punishing kids, a defensive lineman, for not going to an event to work out with no pads on. It just the whole process is just screwed up, in my opinion. And like you said, Ryan, like, I get it. Like, different people can have different opinions. I get
Sure.
that. But some of the variation in rankings is just getting absurd. For example, how can 247 have Micah Bell ranked in the same place nationally, number 67, that On3 has him ranked in the state of Texas, number 67? Right? Like, this stuff is just it's just getting so screwy. And the frustrating thing for me is I don't care, to be honest with you, but then what we get so many comments, well, this guy's this or that guy's that because of this. And here's the other thing. In this era of NIL, it is especially impactful because a lot of what kids' reputations are based off of is their high school recruiting rankings and where they're going to college. And so when you see these things, it's really frustrating. It really is. And just the lack of consistency with it. And just, yeah, I mean, there's always been a difference, right, in how one service ranks a kid compared to another. But when you just see these crazy variances, it just becomes a little nuts. Do you want to go through and well, I'm sorry, we'll finish what you're saying. We'll go through and kind of go through the updates that we've seen.
Yeah, I would love to go through the rankings a little bit just to give it a little context. I was just going to say, I mean, On3 even has that NIL, like, what would you even call that? Like a calculator, I guess?
Yeah,
like they kind of determines.
Absurd. Yeah.
And we never even talked about this on the show, but you're literally putting a price on a player's worth, which is kind of weird to me. Just a 17-year-old kid, a 16-year-old kid,
right,
like putting their worth out there. It's kind of an odd distinction to me.
And how they base it, it's screwy. I don't even really. I mean, it's just. I mean, I get what they're trying to get noticed and all this other stuff, but it's just it's creepy, it's weird, and it's I mean,
I think creepy is the best word, honestly.
Yeah.
Creepy is the best word for it.
Yeah.
And I mean, my last thing is, like, before we get into some of the more specific rankings, when we're talking about how these guys are ranked, it really drives me crazy because I think that we glorify the 7-on-7 and camp circuit just in general, because at the end of the day, it matters what's going on between the lines. Obviously, like we're traditionalists. I'm a purist in that way. But I don't understand. So, like, all right, a player goes to a camp, has a bad showing, he's dropped a little bit. Okay, that's fine. I can get that to a degree. But if a player's not at an event, what has changed your opinion on him since you last saw him on the field, which gave you your initial opinion on him? It just doesn't make any sense. So it's
I understand that sometimes, like, look, I haven't seen the kid, so I'm not going to change my ranking of him. But some other kids are graded out higher. So for example, Elijah Paige goes from 223 to 237. That's 14 spots. Like, to me, I could make a case. Boubacar Traore goes from 4 to 93. That, to me, is more about just, okay, some guys leaped him based on we do have new intel. Your grade hasn't changed, but some other guys, have seen their rankings go up because they did things. That's fine. That's fair, right?
Yep.
But some of this stuff is just, like, blatantly absurd. I mean, to drop a guy like, Drake Bowen's the big one. You dropped him 70 spots, essentially. It is just really, really weird. And, again, there's several, like Braylon James and Rivals went from, like, number 76 to 200 something. Like Caleb Beasley in the 2024 class, he was ranked number 42 overall, and then by Rivals. And then when they did their most recent rankings update, they dropped him out of the 250 completely. Based on what? I mean, everything I've seen, he's done pretty good at these camps. So those are just weird things where you're taking something that a kid did in pads and you're changing them. Like, Braylon James dropping 32 spots to number 276 is just, or 278 and On3 is just weird to me, and Jaden Greathouse jumps up 37 based on, again, we're being based on what?
Right.
Like, how many, like, say, well, we've seen, I mean, do you see new film of him? I don't think he's at 7-on-7s. I don't think he's at these. I mean, what have you seen from Jaden Greathouse to make you bump him up that high? What have you seen from Charles Jagasol to make him go from 64 to 25? in an update that you've done, wrestling's been over since the last update. I mean, they've done an update since his wrestling was over. Could it possibly be based on? He doesn't go to camps, so this stuff is just screwy. But people are going to base their opinions on where kids are ranked, and but it's it's a frustrating there. But I do kind of want to go over some of the changes. So we'll do. You want to do on 3 first, Ryan? You want to do on 3 first?
Yeah, sorry, my internet seems to be cutting out a little bit.
No worries.
But yeah, let's on 3 sounds like a good way to start. I mean, I guess starting with the positives is always a good thing, right, Brian? I mean,
well, Notre Dame. I mean, on 3 has some really good stuff in there for Notre Dame. I mean, I don't think this is a pro Notre Dame, anti Notre Dame thing, because it's with on 3 and 247 both. There's guys moving up and guys moving down. This isn't like Rivals back in the day where literally like 11 Notre Dame commits will all fall. This isn't that kind of thing. So it is. I mean, there is some good and some bad, but there's mostly good. And number 1 is Notre Dame is tied with Ohio State for the most players in the on 3 top 300, which is 13. I haven't configured the 247 yet because that came out like right before the show, or at least I saw it right before the show was about to start. Georgia has 9 players in the top 300. LSU has 9. Texas has 8. Alabama has 7. USC has 6. Notre Dame and Ohio State are tied with 13. Notre Dame is also second behind Ohio State with 6 top 100 players. Notre Dame is the only team with 2 players in the top 10. They're the only team with 3 players in the top 20. So obviously they now have 3 Notre Dame players ranked in the top 20. They're now 3 5-stars. Keon Keeley stayed at number 3. Charles Jagasol moved up a spot to number 6. And then Peyton Bowen had a 19-person jump to 30, from 37 to 18. Now, again, Peyton Bowen's a guy that you can understand him going up or down because he's been at a lot of different events. He's been at 7-on-7s. He was at the Future 50 and those type of things. And from everything I read, he was the second fastest. Brian Smith was there. He said he had the second fastest 40 time. I don't know if it was like they all ran 40s and he was second fastest, or it sounds like it might have been like a sprint and they raced.
Like a race.
Yeah, and there was like only one guy that beat him. I don't know if that's how it went. It is confusing the different ways that I read it, but he had the second fastest time there and was the standout. So, I mean, you understand why on 3, who already had him highest than anybody else anyway, rightfully so at 37, moved him up to 18. Sullivan Absher is next. He jumped up 21 spots to number 77. Christian Gray jumped up 71 spots to number 79. And again, this is why we're saying this isn't a, oh, gee, you're hating on Notre Dame. There's some really good stuff in here for Notre Dame. Sure. It's just the process of, I mean, I don't get
how do we get here? How do we get here?
Right.
Is the question. Yeah,
right.
No, I totally get that.
And so the 6th guy in the top 100 is Boubacar Traore, who dropped 16 spots, number 99. Again, that's most likely like a 15 spot drop, 16 spot drop is to me more of a other guys have kind of jumped up that we've seen
because this is like an identification, like evaluation period too, right? Like that's the one good thing about these camps and stuff is that like some guys are maybe just getting on your radar a little bit, or you have seen a jump from a physical stature perspective, or just from a athleticism perspective. Like that stuff does happen. So there's certainly merit.
And some guys are going to fall that don't get seen by other guys that have gotten seen. So I'm okay with that one. Jaden Greathouse goes up 37 to number 154. Brendan Vernon fell 6 spots to number 186, which tells me that's I disagree with where he's ranked, but it's a 6 guys just jumped him based on what they've done. I'm okay with that. That's different than having him 212 and then completely taking him out of your top 247, like 247 Sports did. Drake Bowen fell 14 spots to number 234, which is just patently absurd. But again, that's a normal. Other guys just have been seen. Drake's been playing baseball. These guys have been seen. They jumped ahead of him. I can live with that. 234
in a vacuum is ridiculous.
Is insane.
So ridiculous. Yeah.
Devin Houston is, I mean, like you made the case, Ryan, like you're talking about Drake Bowen, if with a good senior season, is jumping up to a 5-star. That's your evaluation. And I would tend to agree with you because we thought him and Peyton Bowen were 2 guys that were like borderline 5-star guys. Mm-hmm. And, obviously I'm not going to jump him up because he hasn't played any football. So I'm not going to change that opinion. We'll see in the fall. And other people are just like completely dropping him out, which is, I just think, a little absurd. Devin Houston went up 11 spots, number 261. Braylon James fell 32 spots, number 278. Rico Flores fell 23 spots, number 289. and Adon Schuler fell 6 spots to number 294, which is, again, a typical, just some people have passed him because he hasn't been doing anything like that this summer. And then if you look at some of the other Notre Dame targets, Jeremiah Love fell 5 spots from number 102 to number 107. Jaden Asbury fell, looks like 48 spots to number 219. And then Samuel Mpemba is up 9 spots from 103 to 94. And then I don't know what Austin Novosad's ranking was.
I saw, yeah, I don't know what it was prior, but Brandon said that he was in the top 100 on 247 now.
Yeah, and he's 188th on 3. I don't know what it was before. So I can't tell you what he is. Kenny Minchie also jumped into the top 300 from on 3 to number 376. That is higher than he was before. Obviously, he was a consensus 3. I think only one service had him as a 4-star, and it wasn't on 3. So they've updated him in that as well. So Minchie is not in the top 247 for 247 because he's committed to Pitt and it doesn't get clicks. So if you want to look at the that's on 3. If you look at the top 247, let's actually, I'm just going to pull this up. Just give me a second to move this over to another thing so I can sort it. That way I can kind of just go who's the highest ranked to the lowest ranked. So if you look at that, you've got, let's see here. All right. So you've got number 1 is Keon Keeley at number 7. So he's up 2 spots. Mm-hmm. And then next you have Charles Jagasol is the second ranked Notre Dame player. He's up to number 25 after being number 64 before. Next on the list is Micah Bell, who fell 12 spots to number 67 after a dominant track season. Peyton Bowen fell 9 spots from number 75 to number 84. And Ryan, I don't see how that happens.
I just don't know how 2 different platforms can have such a varying opinion like that. You know, like it's so weird to me. Just so weird.
Like if you were to just tell me without any context, they have him 84th and the others 18th. All right, that's different, but whatever. One likes it more. But then you're going to show me one jumped them way up and one dropped them down about 10 spots. Right. It just doesn't make any sense.
100%.
Next is Boubacar Traore, who is number 93, which means he is ranked in the top 100 by 2 different services. Nice. Braylon James actually went up 4 spots to number 96. Another one. How does one jump him up to 96 and the other one drops him 30-some spots to whatever 96?
He's in the 200s compared to the 96.
Almost out of the ranking. Yeah. Cooper Flanagan dropped 12 spots, number 123. Christian Gray went up 29 spots to number 131. Drake Bowen fell 67 spots to number 143. Sullivan Absher went up 23 spots to number 184. Devin Houston fell 3 spots to number 192. Joe Otting went from a 3-star player to he's now a 4-star, ranked number 224 in the country. So good for Joe Otting.
For sure.
Adon Schuler fell, 35 spots to number 229. Elijah Paige dropped 14 spots to 237. Jaden Greathouse fell. Again, how does one put him up 30 spots and the other one drops him 13 spots? He fell to 238.
Is this fair to say, Brian? Do you feel like guys that don't tackle the circuit, like they're the ones that get kind of pushed as much?
By
like,
some.
Because everybody that you just named that's taken a massive drop, they're pretty much the kids that just don't care about going to those circuits and whatnot,
Yeah, but then like Joe Otting hasn't done that stuff and he jumps way up, so it just doesn't say. In part of it, if you knew behind the curtains a little bit of how some of this is done, it's also some people have. That's my guy. I'm going to advocate for my guy.
Sure.
So Jaden Greathouse's Rico Flores is just up a spot to 246. And then Jay Lamar is at 247. Or actually, they were up, and then they went down. So they've been around that 246, 247. Now, here's the good part. 17 of Notre Dame's 20 commitments are ranked as top 247 players. That does not include Brendan Vernon. Yeah.
I don't even know. I don't even know what to say about that, man. He is the most criminal. He went from a little semi overrated to criminally underrated
by rivals. I think he was a little bit overrated by rivals because they had him in the top 10.
Yep.
And we both thought he was like a top 100 player, no doubt, but not a 5-star, which I think is a fair. Now it's just absurd, some of the ranking drops that he's going through. So, yeah, it's
my favorite is still Micah Bell. It's my favorite. Ranking discrimination.
I wonder if they've updated like all their guys. I'm going to go to his On3 page. If like they only ranked like updated the top guys and if they changed his ranking or not. Yeah, he's still 67th in the state of Texas. He's 67th in the state of Texas, but on 24 has him 67th in the country.
All I have to say is that this is more reason why Notre Dame needs to recruit Texas. There's 67 players,
apparently
66 players better in the state of Texas than Micah Bell.
Here's the funny part, right? Here's what makes some of this absurd, Ryan. We're having some fun today. Micah Bell ran a 10.4 and a 20.89, which I saw a thing that said he had one of the 5 to 10 fastest 200-meter times in the entire country.
It's incredible. Yeah, that because everyone wants to talk about the 10-400, which is a great time, but sub 21 in the 2 is stupid fast.
Well below 21. Here's the best part. 247 is the one outlet that I think ranks Micah Bell relatively appropriately at number 67. Yet one of their writers who used to cover Notre Dame wrote an article about the fastest players in the country, and he listed like 8 or 9 guys and then listed a bunch of, because somebody sent me this, like, dude, you got to read this nonsense. Then he listed a bunch of like, other guys to think about, and not Micah Bell didn't even get mentioned in the others to know category. And he's talking about he's talking about track times that aren't even close to what Micah Bell is putting up. And it's just like, this is what people want to know why I get frustrated when people are like, well, this site's reporting this and this site's saying this. What do you have to say about it? And I'm just like, I'm tired of answering questions about people that just aren't good at this or have agendas. And that's the reality of it, is some of this stuff is just absurd. And some of this stuff is just, I
guess it did elicit its reaction, though. I mean, we've spent 24 minutes talking about it right now. So
yeah,
I guess
it is. Then that's why they do it. That's why they do it. It's for clicks. That's why that dude that covers Michigan does what he does. It's so people will talk about it and get clicks. And we don't do that, right? We're gonna provide intel, but I think we're going to talk about that. But we've talked a lot about the negatives. But again, if we're going to just take that away in our opinion of this whole thing, I mean, there's a lot of good in this for Notre Dame. I mean, you're talking about 6 kids in the top 100 according to On3. You're talking about Notre Dame having, 6 kids in the top 100 by 247. That's really good. 17 of your 20 commits are ranked among the 250 best players in the country. And for all we know, it could be 18 because maybe Brennan Vernon's like 249th, right? Because they only rank 247 guys, which I find that, like, get over yourselves. You don't need to only rank 247 guys, right? Like, give us an even number, please. But,
it's the brand, Brian. It's the brand.
High quality group. I mean, whatever we think about 247 and On3 and all this other kind of stuff, the reality is what everyone is saying about this class is it's loaded. Mm-hmm. Nobody has more ESPN 300 guys. Nobody has more On3 top 100 guys. And I'd be willing to bet you that nobody has more. I mean, Notre Dame has 17 kids in the top 247. Most teams don't even have 17 kids committed.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm going to assume that they're the highest there. I mean, so again, this is good for Notre Dame. And, and somebody asked about SI All-American. Our rankings will come out sometime in August. We're just now kind of starting to have some conversations and things about that. So we'll have those things. And we'll do one before the season, then one after the season, and that's it. Right. So that's it's based on, we try to do, because it's meant to be a legitimate ranking, not a clickbait thing where we update it 14 times throughout the course of the year because we don't have anything else better to do in July. So that's where things stand. So those are the rankings updates. I would imagine somebody's going to, Rivals is probably going to come out with a new one here again soon for some reason or another.
Is ESPN ever going to bring a new ranking out? Or
they did about a month ago. Yeah.
Did they?
They did. Yeah. And they had some guys. I mean,
ESPN.
The ESPN actually, if people are curious about that, their rankings are a little bit interesting. They have Braylon James and Jaden Greathouse both in the top 100. Braylon ranks 46th. Jaden is 85th. They have Keon Keeley ranked 23rd. There are not 22 players in the country better than Keon Keeley. They have Drake Bowen in the top 100. They have Peyton Bowen ranked 49th. They have Brendan Vernon ranked 104th, which is, I would say that's reasonable. I would have him a little bit higher, but I'm not going to argue the 104th because you may be 15. If you're within 15 to 20 spots of where I think a guy should be, I don't really say that I disagree with that. It's in the range. And we often do that. We'll say like 50 to 75 range. Well, 50, 75, that's a 25 spot difference. I mean, that's a big difference. But I think that's where you can kind of leave some. You always have to be willing to leave some room for just different opinions and different impressions. And it's like, hey, I agree with you on that kid, but I disagree with you on that kid. That's why this kid's not there, because I think these other 10 kids I actually think are better, even though we agree on this other kid.
Yeah.
But they have, I think, CEC 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 players. 14 of Notre Dame's 20 commits are in the ESPN 300. And honestly, all but 3 of them are in the top 200. Because you have Micah Bell 128, Christian Gray 149, Adon Schuler 169, which is much more reasonable and where I think he should be. Bubakar's 211, Devin Houston is 182. Rico Flores is 250, 217, and Jane Lamar is 256. And then Jeremiah Love is ranked 90th on ESPN.
It's funny? Someone just put it in the chat too, and I saw this the other day, and I completely forgot about it. Do you know Jaden Greathouse is rated as a tight end by ESPN?
No, he's not. Are you serious?
Yes, he is. Saw it the other day. Someone just put it in the chat, which reminded me. Yep, he's rated as a it's like they do the thing where they rate him as 2 different styles of tight ends, and he's like I think he's rated as a flex tight end. Or something.
Oh my gosh, that's so ridiculous. ESPN also has Jaden Asbury ranked 32nd, so they have him ranked pretty high. So anyway, that's the rankings updates for the different services and Rivals too. They're up until Joe Otting committed.
Mm-hmm.
Every player for Notre Dame in the class was a 4-star recruit. And based on their last ranking, that's CC 3, 6, 7, 10, 13. According to Rivals' last rankings update, 15 of their Notre Dame's 20 commits are ranked in the top 250. That does not include Jaden Lamar. That does not include Elijah Paige. That does not include Devin Houston, and that does not include Adon Schuler, because they actually have Preston Zinter in the top 250.
Wow!
And they have Sam Pendleton in the top 250,
and not Elijah Paige. Talk about criminally underrated. It's Elijah Paige. We were talking about that earlier on the phone too. It's like I understand that he's added some weight this offseason. You need to see that weight on the frame and how he plays with it, all that good stuff. But we're talking about a kid that's 6 foot plus, with long arms, plays at Pinnacle, has good feet, good film. Like, what am I missing here with Elijah Paige that he's that criminally underrated? It's just very strange.
And honestly, I can live with him being in the 200s because of his. And we've talked about this. His junior film is good, but there's definitely some areas like he's got to get stronger. He's got to fill out, and part of the reason he got a bump from us is because he has filled out. Now he's not gotten the full bump. Because we have him as a 5-star upside guy, but neither of us have him in the top 100 right now. I don't think. I've got him as a 150 player. Yep. And I'd probably put him in like a 140 to 160 range is kind of where his grade falls for me right now. Because like every kid has a grade and there's a range of where that grade is. And he's on the lower end of the 150 range, right? But the tools are there, and so we'll see how he kind of feels out. And if somebody wants to have him like 247 has him at number 230, was it 237? I'm okay with that. Like I'd probably have him a little higher, but whatever. But to have a guy that's like like Micah Bell, that's not you have a difference of opinion. That's just you haven't done your job. And I wouldn't be shocked if they haven't even seen that kid play really yet, or they only saw like sophomore or freshman film and haven't. Because. Yeah, from what I understand, there's a very small number of people that are involved in the rankings at On3. If one person said it's only one guy, somebody else told me it's just a few.
Interesting. Yeah. I would say they probably watched Micah Bell's running back highlights and were like, I don't know what to do with this kid. Can he play corner?
Right.
Like it's one of those deals too. Like I wouldn't put that past anybody.
Yeah, it's not good. That's what I do know. And Jaden Asbury dropping 100 spots is like, how does one guy ranked 32nd by one outlet and 219th by another? It's just
you said it to start this show why that Jaden Asbury stuff might be happening.
Yeah, that's true. That's a very good point. So Ryan, those are the rankings updates. And again, a lot of good stuff in there for Notre Dame. You know, I mean, look, we mock and we joke, but why this stuff matters is because these things still have an impact on perception. That's the reality, right? And so when you're trying to put a recruiting class together, you know, most coaches don't care where a kid is ranked, but they understand that it matters to other kids. True story. I was told by some people that are close to Ohio State that Ohio State didn't think very highly of Tate Martell as a player, but they already had quarterbacks before and they knew they were going to get a guy after him. But he was a 5-star kid who was very influential and very well liked by other commits. So they recruited Tate Martell because they thought it would have an impact on them getting other kids, even though they didn't think the kid could play, right? Because he was a 5-star, which, you know, is kind of laughable and is proven to be laughable. Yep. You know, so that right there, because quarterback wasn't they didn't need a big time quarterback in that class. They went out and got a guy that was ranked really high because they thought it would help them get other players, and it did. And, you know, so coaches understand that other kids look at this stuff and the recruits think it matters. I don't think it matters. I think it's, you know, I don't think it's really does a whole lot. And I think it's getting worse. It used to be where I at least respected some of it because I thought there was football people involved in the process. Now there's not a lot of football people involved in this. So that's kind of where I've lost a lot of my, you know, respect for just the entire process. But like you said, there's some good in there for Notre Dame. The perception is good for Notre Dame. Somebody asked about Ronan Hannafin. Ronan Hannafin is still a 3-star by On3, but he is the number 166 player overall by 247.
That's another one where, like, how can his opinions differ so much? Like, that's a massive difference.
Right. 3-star versus borderline top 150 guy. Correct. Yeah. And like, I think Ronan Hannafin should be ranked higher than 166, but I'm not going to argue with that. We're in the same ballpark. That's the thing, is like, we're in the same ballpark. But when you have a kid ranked in the 200s or not even in the top 250 that I think is a borderline top 100 kid, we're not in the same ballpark. And when you start talking about how a kid being like Micah Bell, where he's ranked by On3, we're not even the same galaxy at this point in time with how you evaluate him. Because I would argue I'd have him ranked higher nationally than you have him ranked in his own state. That's just, we're not even speaking the same language. Here's another thing too, why this matters. Because you know what else is perception-wise is strong? Is there's a very, very strong perception into regards where the recruiting rankings are, more with fans, but also with other recruits. The rankings that came out today, I think, help Notre Dame's chase to be number one, because you have some guys that have gone up in the Charles Jagasol is going to see a huge jump in the rankings. I believe he is now considered let me just look real quick, because I don't want to speak out of turn if I'm incorrect here, but I believe that Charles Jagasol is now a 5-star on the composite list. No, they still have him at number 48. He's now a top 48. He's the top number 48 overall player. He's getting closer to that 5-star status. You know, Peyton Bowen is getting closer to that 5-star status. You know what though? I actually want to look at this, Ryan, because the way that 247 does their composite, their own rankings get more. They count their own ranking more than others, which is why they call it a composite. Where On3 actually has a consensus. And they always brag about, like, we, you know, to weigh all three of them equally and all that kind of stuff. So let me see here real quick. So Jagasol is 38. It looks like there. So he's creeping up. So he's gone up on the composite. Other guys are going up in the composite as they rate. I mean, Joe Otting's going to see a big jump in points because he's now went up into the top 250. Sylvan Apsher's gone up in both rankings, so his points are going to be higher. And then when you see a guy like Austin Novosad have a big jump in points, Ronan Hannafin has had big jump in points. Jeremiah Love when Notre Dame started recruiting him in March, he was a consensus 3-star recruit. Now, if you look at Jeremiah Love, he's ranked number 107 by On3. He's ranked number 90 by ESPN. He's ranked number 49 by Rival, and he's ranked number 87 by 247 Sports. So that's also how Notre Dame can end up with a higher ranked class, is that guys jump up. Now there's, you know, other schools are going to see that as well. Like On3 had the corner from Texas with the two last, like the hyphen last name.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Calvin Simpson Hunt, right? And that what is,
Yep.
They jumped him in the top 250, which I think, how can you have him in the top 250 in the nation? And you have Micah Bell 67th in the entire country. That's, you know, or I mean, in the entire state, you know. But so I think those things matter too, because Notre Dame's going to see a jump in the rankings because of this.
Sure.
And so if you look at the rankings, a lot of people said Ohio State has jumped Notre Dame. That's not actually true for all the rankings. Notre Dame is still number one on the 247 on the On3 composite or consensus team rankings. And Notre Dame is still number one on 247's rankings. Now, Ohio State's number one on the composite rankings, but Notre Dame is number one on the 247 team rankings. Notre Dame is also number one with ESPN as well. And here's the best part. Notre Dame and Rivals are tied for number one with Rivals. They literally have the same amount of points, which you don't see that often, right? And I'm looking at it today. They both have 2,697 points. So they're tied for number one. Here's the best part. The number 3 team, Texas, is over 500 points behind Notre Dame.
It's crazy.
And Ohio State. So, I mean, it really is Notre Dame and Ohio State. And Matt says they got a commitment yesterday. These are all updated rankings right now, even with Ohio State getting their commitment yesterday, who was a 4-star kid. So that just shows you how much further ahead Notre Dame and Ohio State are than everybody else. I mean, that's the wild thing. Like, a buddy of mine was trying to tell me Georgia's just fine because, they have 14 commits. They're ranked 10th. They've had a lot of misses. They lost Justice Haynes, whose dad played at Georgia.
Did you see that he came out and he said that Ohio State was his number 2?
Right. Third.
Right.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
They were third. Man. But so when I looked at Rivals rankings, they're almost 1,000 points behind Notre Dame. So what I did was I gave them the number 1, 2, and 3 players in the country. And if you do that, they're still a couple hundred points behind Notre Dame and Ohio State. If they today got the commitments from, I don't even know who they are for Rivals, but the number 1, 2, and 3 player, they'd still be a couple hundred points behind Notre Dame and Ohio State and be at 17 commits, which is a lot. They're not being crystal balled for those guys, right? I mean, it looks right now that they're not going to get Caleb Downs. That's an in-state kid. So the staff turnover that Georgia has had has really hurt them, and they are struggling. But you look at Notre Dame and Ohio State, they are so much further out ahead of everyone else. And they're ahead of everyone else in every points, average points. Ohio State is 4.05 is their average because they have 2 5-stars to Notre Dame's 1. Notre Dame is at 4. The only other team at 4 is Auburn, and they have 4 commitments. They only have 4 kids in the class. And then after that, the next closest is Clemson at 3.88, and then USC at 3.82, Texas at 3.78. Those are big differences. I mean, those are big differences.
Auburn only has 4 commitments in the class.
Only 4 commitments.
That's
that's not good.
Tough place.
Texas A&M only has 5. So
the checks didn't clear yet.
No. I mean, I don't know if they've landed a kid since that whole Saban Jimbo spat happened.
Was not a great look.
Kid. No,
it was not a great look.
Yeah.
Nope.
So those are the latest rankings updates. So again, I think they help Notre Dame from a perception standpoint by and large. I mean, we can argue about Drake Bowen and all this kind of stuff and how absurd that is, but other guys are getting bumps as well, which balances it out. And Drake is still ranked, unlike Brennan Vernon, which is absolutely insane to me, by the way. But that's where we're at. That's where we're at with the rankings. And so there you go. You have the latest. It is funny how they're because they're both started by the same guy. Shannon Terry started 247, built it up, sold it for a bunch of money, and then he got some new investors, and now he's building up on 3. And there's a lot of similarities to what they're doing at 247. And now they're like kind of competing against each other, and they're doing rankings releases the same day. It's kind of
where was Shannon Terry before 247? Didn't he
Rivals.
do something else?
He started Rivals
first.
Yeah, he didn't do it. I think he wasn't as much of the guy. I think there's other people involved with Rivals. I think
just a part of leadership.
But he was. I mean, he was probably at the top of that leadership.
Gotcha.
Group. But that's what he does. He builds these things up, makes them profitable. Gets investors to build them up, sells them for a ton of money. He makes a lot of money, and then he goes and does it again. So smart business. Business. There's people want it. Yeah, I have no disrespect. I don't particularly like him, but I don't. It's not because of what he's doing with these different services. I mean, I think the things they're doing at 2-4 on 3 are like aesthetically. I like what they're doing. There's some things they're doing that I like.
There's a lot good with it. I don't like the whole NIL valuation and all that type of stuff, but like there is a lot. I mean, like I like the I like the consensus rankings. I think that's
as
cool.
opposed to I like it better than the composite. Yes.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it. I think it's a cool element. I think there's a lot of validity to it. I think that the site looks nice. It's aesthetically
They're
pleasing, like
not
you
afraid
said.
to put the other outlets on their site. So if you go to the
Right.
composite rank, they show like 247 just gives the composite ranking. They don't show you mention the other services. If you go to
Sure.
On3's player page, you go to the industry comparison, they put On3, 247, ESPN, and Rivals all right there, and they show the rankings, which I
It's very
respect.
it's very friendly to like just like a fan that wants information on recruits. Like it is very friendly because they even have like the scouting tab, they have the
Hmm.
recruiting tab, they have the NIL tab if you want to go
Hmm.
down that rabbit hole,
They
whatever.
show all the visits where a kid is gone. Yeah.
Yep. The
Now,
offers, like they show everything.
yep.
Yeah.
And they have a little, analysis of it. Now, the thing that stinks is I think their rankings are really jacked up for the most part. And
Mhm.
I still don't have a clue how they've come to a ranking for the team rankings. Still don't make sense to me. Like there was a time when Notre Dame had like 12 commits and Alabama had like 3 and USC had like 3 and they were ranked higher than Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And it still doesn't make any sense to me. They try to get too cute with some of that stuff, but overall, they're as far as just getting information on prospects, I go there as opposed to anywhere
First.
else.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I just want to see
I
a
always
kid's
go there
ranking,
first.
right?
Mhm.
And so that's definitely so, and that's what he's trying to do, and that's to me that's a smart business plan. It's just there's a lot of other stuff that is going on at On3 that I kind of find distasteful and disgusting, and the NIL thing is one of those. So, and a
Yes.
school that we have not mentioned in any of this is Michigan, who
What
is
was his
currently
rank,
ranked
Michigan?
24th on the rankings on3 consensus rankings, and I'm trying to find their ranking.
That's actually higher than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
If I'm being
they
completely
are
honest.
36th on Rivals.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a tough time for the old Wolverines right now on the recruiting trail. They are currently behind, and they have 12 commits. They are currently behind Wake Forest,
Oh
Arizona, Pitt, TCU, Boston College, North Carolina, Iowa State, Nebraska, Minnesota, Purdue, Michigan State. Michigan State also has a higher per player average. They are behind Duke. Mike Elko putting together a nice, I mean, it's volume. They got 25 commits already. But yeah, Washington is doing better than them right now. Louisville has a higher ranking and a per player average. They're behind West Virginia, Iowa, Northwestern. That's about volume.
Yeah.
And of course, Texas Tech. Cincinnati's putting together a nice little class. They're 13th.
You mentioned one that I saw a little bit of the other day. I was just kind of like, just browsing through some stuff. Arizona's actually not doing a bad job on the recruiting trail,
No,
man. They're
dude,
doing
I'm gonna tell you something
okay.
right now. I'm gonna tell you something right now.
Yeah.
And if you look at
Yeah.
some of the kids they got in last year's class, they got some dudes.
Yeah.
That kid, that McMillan kid they got, the receiver from California, that kid is a baller. And
Is
they
he
got
related
about
to Jalen? Is he
no, no,
related
no,
to Jalen?
no,
No.
no, no,
No.
but and they got about 5 or 6 kids. I'm like, those kids can play.
Mhm.
And they did that after a 1-11 season. Like if he
Yep.
can just go 6-6 and take them to a bowl game this year, which for Arizona is not going to be easy because Judd Fish inherited a rough roster.
Bad
But if he can
roster.
somehow just get them 5-7, 6-6, something like that, he's gonna start knocking some kids down because he's doing a really nice job out there of getting quality players. And as you mentioned, I mean, they're sitting here now at 34. A team that went 1-11 last year should not be sitting at number 34 in the rankings.
Yeah, I
You
agree.
know,
And they also they're also competing obviously in state against Arizona State, which is not a great place right now, right? Like that's not a good situation to be
Mhm.
in. So
Yeah.
Arizona's doing all right, man. Like you said, it's been struggles, but on the recruiting trail, I think there's some positive. I mean, I kind of like the quarterback they have in this. What's his name? Brady Doman, right?
The kid from
Quarterback.
Colorado.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's not a bad
Notre
little
Dame looked at
player.
him. They had him
Yeah.
on campus. He did a workout, and he was one of those kids where if he works out, well, this is last summer. If he works out well, they were thinking about offering him. They liked him.
Mhm.
They liked him. It's just that was kind of when it started to really get hot and heavy with Dante Moore,
Yeah.
and so they went in another direction. I like the kids they're going after now better. I think
Sure.
they made the right decision. But like you said, big armed kid, good size. And again, if you can have a 4-star kid to build your class around, the thing holding them back right now is just they went 1-11 last year. He's got to prove you win some games. So he's
Sure.
doing a really nice job. And That's true there's a few teams like that. Like if this new coach can win some games, like if Mike Elko can win some games, he'll recruit some kids to Duke with that academic background. Jeff Brom won some games this year. Look at the class he's putting together.
Yeah.
Caitlyn Deboer is the interesting one at Washington because they're getting their butt kicked right now in state. If you look at their class, they're a top 20 class nationally, but they only have, I think, 2 4-star kids in the entire class, and neither of them are from their own state. They've lost just about every big in-state kid that they've wanted. They've lost since he got hired. And again, he inherited a dumpster fire, but he's going to need to win some games this year to get them rocking and rolling. So